Pushpin disclaimer. This story is a fictionalized retelling inspired by true events. It explores themes of infidelity, family betrayal, and emotional trauma. While characters, settings, and specific details have been altered for narrative purposes, the emotions and circumstances depicted are grounded in real-life experiences. Viewer discretion is advised, especially for those sensitive to topics of betrayal, divorce, and family conflict. This story is meant to shed light on the unseen emotional struggles of those affected by hidden truths within their own homes. It is not intended to attack or judge any individual, but to provide a lens into the pain, confusion, and eventual healing that betrayal can bring. For the longest time, I truly believed I had the kind of family people envied. My parents were what others called a power couple. My dad, a respected engineer with a calm and commanding presence. My mom, a nurturing woman whose smile lit up every room she walked into. Our house was filled with warmth, Sunday brunches, movie nights, and the kind of laughter that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. As their only daughter, I always felt safe, loved beyond measure, protected by the two people I admired the most. We weren't rich, but we were rich in love. Or so I thought. Growing up, I rarely saw my parents fight. They disagreed, yes, but always in hushed tones behind closed doors, never the dramatic confrontations I'd see in movies. My father was often busy, but his presence, when he was home, was grounding. He'd ruffle my hair while passing by the dining table, kiss Mom on the forehead while she cooked, and always left short notes for both of us when he had to leave early for work. My mom would blush like a teenager each time, and I remember thinking, this is what real love must look like. But slowly, so slowly that I barely noticed, things began to change. It started with my dad being absent more often. Business trips got longer, his phone was always in his hand, and sometimes he'd disappear into the garage for hours under the excuse of needing space. My mom's smiles became more strained, and there were times I'd catch her sitting alone in the living room, lost in thought, wiping away tears before I could see them. When I'd ask if something was wrong, she'd smile that same soft smile and say, "It's just a phase." Grown-ups get tired too. As a teenager, I didn't think much of it. Parents grow older. Life gets harder, right? But somewhere deep inside me, I felt something shift. The air at home felt heavier. Conversations became more forced. The warmth I was used to seemed to cool off, like a home slowly losing heat without anyone realizing it. I began to notice how my mom no longer looked at my dad the same way she used to. How my dad seemed more present with his work emails than he ever was at the dinner table. Still, I pushed the thoughts aside. Maybe it's just the stress, I told myself. Back then, I had no idea that everything I believed in, every image I painted of what love looked like, was about to fall apart. I had no clue that one afternoon, without warning, I would walk into a moment that would unravel my entire reality. The first real sign that something was wrong didn't scream at me. It whispered. It came subtly, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit, like a quiet dissonance in the background of a familiar song. My father, who once hated being glued to screens, suddenly couldn't be separated from his phone. He was always texting someone, smiling down at his screen, locking it quickly when someone came close. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he had a new project at work, or maybe he was just stressed. But then I noticed that whenever my mom walked into the room, his face would change. His smile would vanish, and his voice would tense. Something unspoken was happening, and I could feel it, like a storm forming in a clear sky. One night, curiosity got the best of me. While my father was in the shower, his phone lit up on the coffee table beside me. The notification read, "Miss you. Same time next week." My heart skipped. It wasn't saved under a name, just a random set of letters and numbers. I stared at it for what felt like hours, debating whether to open it. But something told me to walk away. I told myself it could be a coworker, a client, or even a prank. But the seed of doubt was planted. My mother, on the other hand, had grown quieter. She no longer asked about his meetings or checked his calendar. She cooked dinner, folded laundry, smiled when needed, but her eyes looked tired. There was one moment I'll never forget. We were watching a film together, And there was a scene where the husband surprises his wife with a weekend getaway. My mother paused the movie and stared at the screen, her fingers tightening around the remote. "It's always like that in movies," she whispered. "But in real life, people just drift away." That line stuck with me for weeks. A few days later, my dad said he'd be out of town for a work conference. I watched my mother nod, emotionless, as if she'd already expected it. That weekend, I stayed home while my parents were apart. I noticed something odd. My dad had left behind a jacket he always brought on trips. It still had his flight ticket in the pocket. I Googled the destination, and nothing. No conference. No event. Just a small inn 3 towns away. The first red flag was no longer a whisper. It had become a heavy knock on my chest. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think my father, my hero, could be lying to us. But something deep inside me knew that a truth was coming, one I wasn't prepared for. And all I could do was wait, caught between suspicion and fear. I started to become more aware of the silence between my parents. I began recording in my mind the small lies, the awkward glances, the growing distance. But still, a part of me held on to hope. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this would pass. I didn't know then that I was already on the edge of truth that would split our family wide open. After discovering that my dad's so-called business trip wasn't real, something shifted in me. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was an investigator, a quiet observer of every move he made. The trust one once had in him, that unshakable belief in his goodness, was now riddled with holes. I didn't want to accuse him without proof, but I couldn't stop noticing everything. The half-truths, the excuses, the changes in routine that no longer made sense. I began writing things down in a journal. Times he left, places he said he'd be, the tone of his voice when he talked about meetings. The more I wrote, the more I realized this wasn't just paranoia. Something was happening. One evening, I decided to follow him. He said he was meeting a client in a nearby city. I told my mom I was going to a friend's house to study, but instead, I took the bus and waited outside the address he had written on a scrap of paper in his coat pocket. I sat across the street, heart pounding, watching as he parked the car, not in front of any office or business building, but in front of a quiet residential house. 10 minutes later, the door opened, and a woman came out. My breath caught in my throat. I knew her. She was a family friend, my godmother, in fact, someone who had been in our lives for years. She smiled at him like they'd done this 100 times. He reached for her hand. They kissed, not a casual peck, but a kiss that lingered, one filled with comfort and familiarity. I turned away, tears clouding my vision. In that moment, I wasn't sure which betrayal hurt more, my father's or hers. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked for hours that night, trying to understand how the people I trusted most had become strangers. At home, I stared at my mom across the dinner table. She was asking me about my classes, smiling gently. I wanted to scream the truth to protect her, but I couldn't do it. Not yet. I felt paralyzed between the responsibility to tell her and the fear of destroying what little peace we had left. In the days that followed, I noticed more things. My father would hum songs he never used to like. He wore cologne on random weekday mornings. He deleted messages from his phone when he thought no one was looking. And yet, he acted so normal at home, like he wasn't carrying a massive secret that was corroding everything beneath our roof. The worst part? I started to doubt myself. I questioned whether I was overthinking. Maybe I misunderstood what I saw. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. My instincts were screaming, louder than ever. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was a reality unfolding, and I was the only one watching. Something was coming. Something big. I didn't know when or how, but I was certain the truth would soon be impossible to hide. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when everything came crashing down. I had left school early that day, a headache, or maybe just exhaustion from the weight of what I'd been carrying inside. My mom was working a double shift at the hospital, and as far as I knew, my dad was at the office. I wasn't supposed to be home until late, and no one knew I'd come back early. As I walked up the driveway, I noticed our front door wasn't locked. That was strange. We always locked it, even if we were just stepping out for a few minutes. I stepped inside carefully. The house was quiet, too quiet. I set my bag down and froze. There was laughter, faint, intimate laughter coming from the living room. I moved slowly, as if my body already knew what my heart wasn't ready to accept. As I peeked around the corner, the sight that met me would stay burned in my memory for the rest of my life. There was my father, half undressed, lounging on the couch. And beside him, curled up in a position far too familiar, was her. My godmother, the woman I had called Tita since I was a little girl. She was wearing one of my mom's robes. Her bare leg draped casually over my father's, their wine glasses set on the table beside a bowl of strawberries, like this was their home, like they belonged. I didn't make a sound. I didn't scream. I just stood there, frozen, heart pounding, so loud it felt like the only sound in the room. My dad looked up and saw me. In an instant, everything in his face changed. He pulled away from her, scrambled to stand, his face drained of color. "Wait, this isn't," he started, but I was already backing away. Tears flooded my eyes. My chest was tight. I stumbled out the door, not even bothering to close it behind me. The air outside felt too thin, the world too bright. Everything I thought I knew about my family shattered in a single moment. It wasn't just the cheating, it was who he cheated with. The betrayal wasn't just from him. It was from someone I trusted, someone I admired. I walked. I don't know for how long. My phone buzzed again and again. Calls from him, a message from her. "Please, let's talk." I turned it off. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed with a friend, silent, unable to speak a word of what I had seen. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. My thoughts ran in circles. Should I tell my mom? Should I confront him? Should I pretend it never happened? The emotional weight was unbearable. I had stepped into something I was never meant to see. But now that I had, there was no going back. The image was carved into my soul, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Not for me. Not for my mother. Not for us. The days that followed felt like I was floating underwater, alive but numb. Everything was muffled. The voices, the routines, the world outside. I went through the motions. I brushed my teeth. I ate cereal I couldn't taste. I answered people with nods or shrugs. But inside, I was unraveling. What I had seen wasn't a dream. It wasn't some sick hallucination. It was real, and it lived behind my eyes now. Every time I closed them, I saw them together. Every time my dad spoke to me, I heard the echo of her laugh in our living room. He tried to talk to me. The night after I saw them, he came to my room, his voice soft, apologetic, rehearsed. He didn't deny it. He didn't even lie. "It just happened," he said. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone." I stared at him, silent. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand why. Why her? Why our home? Why now? But no words came. My silence made him uncomfortable. He left, saying, "We'll talk when you're ready." But I knew that was his way of escaping guilt without facing its weight. I watched my mom closely. She had no idea. She still packed his lunch the next morning. She still reminded him of his dentist appointment. She was still loving the man who had already emotionally left her. And that broke me in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't just my dad who betrayed us. It was the silence between them. The secrets. The years of lies that must have piled up without her noticing. Or maybe she didn't notice. Maybe, like me, she was pretending. Maybe we were all pretending. I talked to no one. Not my friends. Not even my closest cousin. How could I explain something so heavy, so personal? I felt like if I said it out loud, it would become even more real. And maybe part of me was still hoping it would all go away on its own. That he'd end it. That she'd disappear. That I could forget. But that didn't happen. What happened was worse. She kept coming around, casually like nothing happened. I saw her at church with her perfect lipstick and knowing smile. I saw her chatting with my mother, who laughed like they were still best friends. And I felt sick, physically sick. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't unknow the truth. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling, asking myself the same question. Should I tell my mom? I imagined the pain it would cause her, the trust it would destroy. But I also knew keeping it inside was destroying me. I was caught in a war between truth and protection, between love and justice. And every day I stayed silent. I felt like I was betraying her too. The aftershock wasn't just about what I saw. It was about the lies I had to carry the double life I had to live, the heaviness of being the only one who knew the truth. And I knew, eventually, something would have to give. It took me 10 days to gather the courage to do it. 10 days of sleepless nights, of watching my mom laugh at dinner with no clue that her world was already broken. 10 days of pretending to be okay while a storm raged inside me. But the weight of the truth was getting too heavy. It was swallowing me whole. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus. I couldn't look my mother in the eye without feeling like I was lying to her every second. But before I could tell her, I needed to confront him, face to face without pretense. It was a Sunday afternoon. My mom had gone to visit a relative. I waited for that moment. I found my dad in the backyard, watering the plants like nothing had happened. Like our family wasn't on fire. Like he wasn't the one holding the match. "I saw you," I said. My voice was steady, colder than I thought it would be. He looked at me, confused for a second. Then his face dropped. The mask fell. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. "How long?" I asked. Silence. 6 months, he replied finally, barely audible. 6 months. My throat tightened. My fist curled. All that time, birthdays, dinners, our family trip to the beach, he was already living a double life. "Why her?" I demanded. He shrugged. "It just happened. She understands me. We didn't mean to fall in love." That line broke me. We didn't mean to. As if love was some kind of accident. As if cheating wasn't a choice. "She's Mom's best friend," I said, trembling. "You didn't just betray your wife. You destroyed our family." He tried to reach out, but I stepped back. "You don't get to touch me. You don't get to pretend to be my father now." Then I said the words that made his face drop even further. "I'm telling her." His whole body tensed. "Please don't. Not yet. Let me fix this my way." "There's no fixing this," I replied. "She deserves to know. She deserves the truth." That night I told my mom. She stood frozen as I spoke, her eyes wide, her breathing shallow. At first, I thought she didn't believe me. But then she sat down, slowly, carefully, as if her whole body had gone numb. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just asked one question. "Are you sure?" I nodded. And then the silence shattered. She cried in a way I had never seen before. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep, guttural sobs that came from somewhere hidden and sacred. It was the sound of something inside her collapsing. She didn't say much after that. She didn't scream. She didn't pack her things. She just sat in the kitchen, staring at nothing, until the sun came up. And in that stillness, I understood something. The truth doesn't set you free. It sets everything on fire. But sometimes, that's the only way to rebuild what was real. The next few days were a blur of silence, slammed doors, and shattered routines. Our home, once so alive with laughter and ordinary warmth, turned into a place of quiet dread. My mother barely spoke. She moved through the house like a ghost, washing dishes, folding laundry, staring out the window as if trying to locate some lost version of her life. She stopped wearing makeup. She stopped answering calls. The spark that once defined her had vanished, replaced by a hollow grief that settled deep in her bones. My father tried to explain, to reason. He didn't deny anything, but his apologies were weak, mechanical, almost like he was reciting from a script. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I never stopped loving your mother. You have to understand, I was lonely. I didn't want to hear it. Neither did my mom." Whatever he was trying to salvage had already crumbled the moment he crossed that line and brought someone we trusted into the betrayal. The most painful part was watching my mom battle herself. She didn't rage. She didn't throw things. She simply unraveled, piece by piece. Some nights I'd find her sitting in the dark, clutching old family photos, whispering to herself, "Was I not enough?" I would hug her tightly, wishing I had the right words. But what could I say? How do you comfort someone who's been blindsided by the person they built their entire world around? Word got around slowly. My godmother, her, vanished from our lives almost overnight. She deleted her social media. She stopped attending community events. No explanations, no apologies. Just gone. Cowardice in its purest form. As for my father, he moved into a small rental house a few miles away. He still tried to call me every few days, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I didn't know who he was anymore. The man who once carried me on his shoulders and taught me how to ride a bike had become a stranger, someone who destroyed everything he once vowed to protect. School became my escape. My friends slowly found out, and though they tried to be supportive, I hated the pity in their eyes. Everyone says families go through stuff, but not like this. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was betrayal, raw, personal, and brutal. And yet, amid the ruins, something began to grow in me. Clarity. I realized that love, real love, isn't just about flowers on anniversaries or smiling in pictures. It's about loyalty when no one's watching. It's about protecting the people you claim to care about. And my father failed. The fallout of infidelity isn't just a broken marriage. It's the death of innocence. It's a child realizing that even heroes can become villains. That even the most beautiful things, like family, can rot from the inside if lies are allowed to bloom. We were no longer the family I once knew. And maybe we never would be again. But maybe, in the ashes, we could find something new, something more honest, even if it was born from pain. Time doesn't heal everything, but it teaches you how to breathe through the pain. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, life began to reshape itself around the cracks. Our family didn't go back to the way it was. How could it? But in the wreckage, we started to rebuild something different. Something quieter. Something real. My mom didn't magically recover. Healing wasn't some cinematic moment where she wiped her tears, packed her bags, and walked out with fire in her eyes. It was messy. It was slow. There were mornings she didn't get out of bed. There were nights she stared blankly at the ceiling, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. But then there were small victories. She started going on walks. She picked up a paintbrush for the first time in years. She laughed, genuinely, at a joke on TV. I held onto those moments like precious gems, reminders that she was still here, still fighting, still trying to find herself again. She filed for separation. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't yell or seek revenge. She chose peace over war, clarity over chaos. My father didn't resist. Maybe he knew he had already lost the most important thing he'd ever had. He tried to stay present in my life, offering to meet for coffee or talk on the phone. Sometimes I said yes. Other times I ignored him. Forgiveness isn't instant. It's a process. And I was still in the middle of it. As for me, I changed too. I learned that love is fragile, that trust isn't something you hand out freely. I used to see relationships in black and white, heroes and villains, loyalty and betrayal. But the truth is, people are complex. They make mistakes. Some break your heart, some never recover, and some, like me, are left standing in the rubble, try to make sense of the pieces. I started writing in a journal, pages filled with rage, confusion, sorrow, and eventually reflection. I started therapy. I began to understand that my parents' choices were never my fault. Their actions weren't a reflection of my worth. I had to let go of the guilt I carried, the feeling that maybe I should have said something sooner, or maybe stayed silent forever. One day, my mom and I sat at the park, watching kids run around with carefree joy. She turned to me and said, "We may have lost the life we thought we had, but maybe we're finally free to build one that's real." I nodded, and for the first time in a long while, I believed it. This isn't the story I wanted to tell. I would have given anything for a different ending, for my family to stay whole. But sometimes, the truth is what sets you free. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but powerfully. And from that truth comes strength. I walked in on something I wasn't meant to see, but maybe I was meant to see it. Maybe I was meant to face the truth so that the lies could finally end. And from that moment of pain, a new beginning was born.